It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
So we've talked about the smaller decisions, the subscriptions, and how we use our time. And we've talked about the bigger decisions. The biggest decision most people often make in their life is like the housing decision, what house they're going to live in. Let's talk about something kind of in the middle. And I feel like in the world that you and I live in, this is probably the area where we see people screw it up the most and get the most caught up with keeping up with the Joneses and and I made a bad decision. It's going to have a long tail. And that is your car, your automobile purchases.
Well, we live in a unique time with social media and doing it for the gram. I mean, everybody, if you're going to flex, because nobody comes home with you at night usually. They see you at the stoplight. They see you what you park at your workplace. They see what car you park. So especially when you're young and also when you're in your 20s, you can't afford to go buy a big house anyway. Right. So, but the thing and because the industries are set up to where it doesn't really matter what you make, the auto industry will let you buy about anything because what they've found is a solution. If you don't have the income, that's all right. We'll just make sure we get the payments down as low as possible by expanding out how long you have to pay for this vehicle. And then it's also, you think about all the influence that we're always surrounded by, and this is what makes us feel so simple or so small. Is that, and I love this. I mean, if you go on TikTok, there's a guy who's super successful that he goes up to people driving exotic cars and says, hey, what do you do for a living? I love this stuff. And there's nothing wrong with this content. But it is one of those things where I think in addition to this, I know there's other people that I follow on Twitter who have gotten caught up in, and I'm not even going to say names, but they're driving around in Lambos, they're doing all kind of things. And you're like, wow, all I have to do is follow this person and I too will have this lifestyle. But it's worth noting, what are these decisions actually costing you in the long term? But before we got into the deep dive of the numbers, we said, hey, let's play into this because this is the content we pulled from TikTok, and we actually pulled up some of the cars. We got a McLaren, we got a Ford GT, and we got a G-Wagon.
G-Wagon, yep.
Which those cars are around here where we live too. I don't understand it. I don't understand when I see that car costs $160,000. It's a box. And I guess it's because that emblem, they get bigger. You know, the bigger the emblem, the more you're willing to pay, I guess.
So here's what I thought was interesting, and I don't know if you put this together. When the content team was going and finding these TikToks, they actually picked young folks, right? Did you notice that all three drivers
all
of
these drivers are young drivers?
So the question you naturally have, and we all have this, right, is you see a young person driving a McLaren GT, and you know that car, you pull up your phone, you see that car costs $230,000. Your natural question is going to be, oh, okay, well, hey, what do you do for a living? And that's exactly what this guy does. He asks people who drive nice cars, hey, what do you do for a living? Well, so that you guys know, so you're not on the edge of your seat, the McLaren GT young guy said, I'm a chef and I make cooking videos online. I think that's awesome. He's a content creator, and apparently he's done really well. The Ford GT, this is a car that costs $800,000. They said, hey, I love your car. What do you do for a living? He says, YouTube videos.
Daniel looked him up. He had 7 or 8 million subscribers.
I think we're in the right spot, right? YouTube, it sounds like being on YouTube is what leads to this. And then there was the last guy, the G-Wagon, who you said, I don't understand why anyone would drive this. So the question...
Well, by the way, this is, so his dad... go ahead. I'm ruining the whole reveal.
So the question is okay, what's this young person who Brian would say is making a poor decision buying this G-Wagon? What does he do for a living? He says, I don't do anything. I'm a student. My dad got it for himself. He didn't like it, so he just gave it to me.
I mean, but this is some successful, his father, as he says, bought this thing because they thought this is going to make me feel cool. This is going to let everybody see. And then he got in his thing and goes, this thing's a tin can, and gave it to his son, who obviously, I mean, $160,000 vehicle it's just crazy. But that, I digress, because Bo said the right thing. Young people are driving in every one of these clips. I think a lot of people in the world would be shocked to find out all these exotic cars that we all glamorize because we see the highlight reel, we see people on Instagram, we see people on TikTok, young, at the top of their game in youth, but also now wealth. Those two don't typically go together. We're like, let's throw some cold water on the reality of the situation. Do most people realize that exotic car owners or sports car owners are actually old people? It's old people. I mean, because that's the thing that I had Daniel pull this up, and I think because this is one of the things I'm going to make myself sound like I'm a redneck.
Like you're from where you're from. That's what you make yourself sound like.
When I was 17 years old, I had this dream that I knew. I was already a financial mutant in the fact that I knew by the time I turned 25, my insurance rates would go down, and I was like, on my 25th birthday, I'm going to go buy a Corvette.
Of course, because that's what every 25-year-old ought to do.
You know, because that's what, if you grew up on South Atlanta, you're like, Corvette, that's where it's at. And by the way, they are. I mean, if you pull up now a Corvette, they have redesigned them. They do look more exotic car-esque. But you know what the median age, or the average age for an exotic, well, a Corvette, not that it's super exotic, 61 years of age.
It's not the 25-year-old. It's not the Brian Prestons of it. It's not the YouTubers. The average Corvette purchaser is a 61-year-old.
So that's a domestic. That's an American car. Let's go the next one, you know, because you see if we go outside of Georgia in the Southeast, Porsche.
Oh, yeah, it's a great one.
You know, people want the Porsche. That's 50.
Yep.
So if you want the 911, you're going to be 50 years of age.
Again, it's not a 25-year-old. It's not a 30-year-old. It's someone who's probably on the back end of their career, not on the front end of their career.
A Ferrari, because that's, you know, that's tippity top of the food chain. You really are flexing and showing off what you got. It's 51. It's very rare you see young people. So I want everybody who's out there, when you're making this opportunity cost decision, this incremental decision of what to do with your next dollar, the reality is most people are not buying super fancy exotic cars until they're old and probably even have trouble getting into these vehicles. So don't put that unneeded pressure on yourself. And we decided, once again, Money Guy fashion, let's do a case study of something very practical like a Honda Accord versus like a BMW.
Because that's what I feel. I don't see a lot of young people buy. I mean, obviously not buying Porsches and Ferraris. I will say I have a bunch of friends, as soon as they got their degree, first thing they did was go out and buy BMW, a 3 Series or what, because they got their first job, they signed their first, employment agreement, and they thought, I've made it. I went from having $20 in college to now I'm making $40,000 a year. I'm going to go get myself a super fancy car so that I can look the part.
By the way, I did try to convince the content team we got to throw a Tesla version in here.
It's not apples to apples.
I got outvoted.
It's not apples to apples.
So just in case, I just want to keep everybody at bay, I got outvoted. We'll go back to the Honda Accord and BMW case study.
So let's look at this, right? If we look at a Honda Accord Sport, because again, we want to compare apples to apples, so we'll look at kind of the sportier version versus the BMW 3 Series 330i. If you look at the cost of ownership for the first 5 years, looking at maintenance, repairs, and fuel, with the Honda Accord, you'll spend about $10,800 versus on the BMW 3 Series in the first 5 years of ownership, you'll spend about $17,700. So if you look at the cost of the car plus the amount of the maintenance and repairs and fuel costs, in the first 5 years, a Honda Accord will cost you about $31,000 less resale value over the first 5 years. A BMW 3 Series will cost you about $58,000. So that's a difference of about $27,000 in those two consumption decisions. What we think is remarkable is that after 30 years, if you were just to take that $27,000, instead of buying the BMW, instead you decide, I'm going to go with the Accord, I'm going to invest that difference. And I'm going to let those soldiers go into my army of dollar bills, and I'm going to let them grow at 8% for the next 30 years. That car decision that you made, for the car that you will not be driving 30 years from now, most likely, that $27,000 decision could have cost you almost $300,000 in future retirement assets.
I talk about it all the time, the hedonic treadmill, and how just human nature is we absorb whatever we have so quickly, meaning that the high you get from purchasing stuff is short-lived. That dopamine hit where you're so happy, the new car smell from the chemicals as they're peeling off of the car and you're absorbing them in, thinking how awesome it is, it's short-lived.
That's right.
So if you're driving the Honda Accord versus the BMW 3 Series, that dopamine hit that makes you feel so good and flexing so strong potentially could be costing you close to $300,000 at retirement. I want you to think about those things as you're going through life. And it's also, there has been something very enjoyable to me as I've made incremental decisions in my life, especially like with cars. I grew up with my first car was junky. I mean, it was a straight up junkie. So
Cavalier.
The Ragalier, as it was affectionately known. I mean, this thing was, as my wife described it, when the friend, I was set up on a date with my wife, our first date, and she asked Ashley, the girl who'd set us up, she goes, "What color is his car?" She said, "Rust." Because it didn't, the paint
I don't think it was supposed to be rust
colored. It's not
colored.
supposed to be a rust colored. I mean, it was a black car, but there's just a lot of rust on it and other things. But it is one of those things where every time I've had a life decision because I went from the Cavalier to a used Mazda 626, I thought that car was awesome.
Yep.
Because I'd incrementally gone up. Then from there, I went to like a Ford Explorer, and then we went to the Acura. And then, and then I went to the Lexus ES, which was the bottom entry level, but it was new and
so
luxury
nice
to me.
Yep.
And that's what I'm telling you. If you can set your life up, and that's why I talk about the hedonic treadmill, guys, set some increments in there, because that son that we showed on a previous slide that was driving the G-Wagon
Where's he
in his
gonna
20s,
go from there?
where do you go? And I thought
awful.
about this as my daughter hit 16. I had this decision when I was like, do I do the Dave Ramsey method where I make her pay half the car, and and get her a junker, or do I, because of safety and all the stuff, the features they put on cars now, do I go buy her a new one? I can afford to buy her a new one.
Sure, yeah.
I did the life decision of letting her pay for half because I didn't want to steal that fulfillment from her getting a nice car instantly at a young age. I wanted to start going through those life decisions. Guys, there's a lot of things that you have to be careful how fast you bring yourself up to the tippity top tier, because you might find not only is this costing you financially, but it's costing you some of the happiness of creating a journey for yourself where you enjoy each phase of your success versus jumping right off on step one into the luxury, super nice, and then you're going to find you absorb that just as quickly as you would have the Honda Accord, and then where do you go from there? And I think that is part of the human condition's problem with money, is we're always trying to fill the hole with happiness from the things we buy. And I can tell you from somebody sitting at the top of the food chain, it doesn't fill the hole. You better figure out your why, because this stuff will have an impact.
And Brian, you say this all the time. You've said it over and over again. You think of like cars as sort of financial napalm to your wealth building journey. And one of the reasons is, we talked about this, we want to be field generals for our assets, and we want to deploy our dollars as effectively and efficiently as possible. Well, one of the big problems with cars, a lot of people, like when you're doing a net worth statement, you might like list it in your asset column. The problem with an automobile in your asset column is that it is an asset that loses value rapidly. You've seen this chart from Daniel before. This is data from Edmunds. If you look at how quickly a car depreciates on average, after the first year, it's worth about 81% of its initial value. After year two, it drops to 69%, and then 58%, 49%, 40%, 33%. So instead of taking your army of dollar bills and putting it in a Roth IRA, in your 401k, in your 457, and allowing that dollar to become more and more and more valuable, you sink it into an automobile that all you're really guaranteeing is that next year it will be worth less, and then less, and then less and less. So if you are someone in normal times out there thinking about making a car decision, obviously there are times when it makes sense to buy new cars. We've talked about that. But if you are looking to get the best bang for your buck, there's nothing wrong with a car that is a few years old where someone else has paid that front-end depreciation in normal times.
Yeah, and we know these are unique times, but even if you understand that cars, because of inflation, are not depreciating like they historically have, they'll get back to it.
They will. It will.
Realize vehicles still, that's just one of the downsides of vehicles. In addition to that, you have to pay for the fuel that you're putting into it. You have to pay for the insurance. And it's just something that no matter how nice it is, I mean, if you ever want to entertain yourself, I go to the annual SEMA show out in Las Vegas. Go on eBay and type in prior SEMA cars, and you can go find on eBay cars that were 15, 12, even 20 years ago, tippity top, and people were just had slobber coming out of their mouth looking at these cars. Now you can go buy these things for practically nothing because they're old. I mean, and that's the thing. All things that you buy, they get old. I mean, so that's the thing, is that don't figure out your why so that you don't get caught up in the material stuff that's just going to get old, outdated, and you're going to be disappointed in it in the future.
And so here's what I think is so powerful. So Brian, like in baseball, right? You have like specialists. You got like your pitchers, or you have, growing up there were like these utility players, right? The folks that could do a lot of different stuff and they could do it really, really well. I think when it comes to building financial independence and being a true financial mutant, you don't just want to get the decision right on your house, or just get the decision right on your car, or just get the decision right on how you spend your time or how you waste your dollars. Because what's amazing is if you can process the world differently and you can view things differently, these seemingly small, isolated decisions can have a huge overall impact in your wealth building journey. Because if we just look at sort of the three that we went through, we said that the decision you make around subscriptions, by the time you get to retirement, could impact almost $500,000 of your retirement dollars. The housing decision, for every $100,000 of mortgage you decide to take on, that could be $1 million of retirement assets. And then when you make your automobile purchasing decisions, just on one automobile purchase, that could cost you almost $300,000 in retirement dollars. And you sort of stack those decisions on top, just those three things could lead to $2 million of assets by the time that you get to retirement.
I think what I love about this is that I get the reflective part of looking over the decades of my working career. And I look at all my friends and I look at other people you hang out with in the community. And I think of people, they're shocked when you get to a point that your ability to be a financial mutant is no longer undercover. Mm-hmm. Because there does come a point with success. You just can't hide what's kind of how things are going. But you can't, good financial mutants, likely, there's a reason we have the Millionaire Next Door, Everyday Millionaires. Mm-hmm. We put titles on things like this, minority mindset, and those type of things. And we use the word financial mutants is because nobody knows who you are or how you're doing it because you look like everyone else. But your friends and your peers, they'll look at you and go, how did so-and-so get so much more money than me? I think we came out of college at the same time. We were all making about the same amount of money. How do they look like, to be able to buy that, they have to have millions in the bank behind them. How did they do that? It is exactly the list that we just went over in the life decisions that creates that. Nobody sees this stuff overnight. The car you drive, the furniture you put in your house, the subscriptions you have, how you use your time, the housing you live in. But these incremental decision-making processes, if you do this right, people are going to look at you in the future and be like, how do they do it? And that's what you want. You're not trying to look rich. You're actually trying to become rich. That's exactly right. And I think that's the problem that so much of the world gets caught up in. They're trying to look the part versus build the actual reality. And and I can tell you, that is fulfillment, is when people, not because you're a flexer or a show off, but it's just because people are like, wow, something's different about the way they're living their life. We just gave you the clues. Now I would ask you, turn this inward to yourself, because maybe it's not the cars. Or maybe if you live in a high cost of living area, yes, you can trim $50,000 out of your decision, but it's not the full 100. You have to find the incremental decision, the excess in your life to create this success. And I want to challenge you. Go be a financial mutant. Go live the life that people don't see, but one day they go, how did they do that? You can be a part of that. Just become a financial mutant. We create so much with the Money Guy Show. We're hoping we get you inspired and energized to go do this for yourself too.
And look, we're going to keep doing it. Our charge here is we want to make sure that we can add as much value to your financial lives as possible, so that as you do have a question around what kind of car should I buy? What kind of house should I buy? How should I approach open enrollment? You feel like you have a team here at the Money Guy Show that can help you navigate that. If you've not gone out to the website, go check out our website, moneyguy.com. We have a resource page out there that is full of free resources like our wealth multiplier, like the FU course cheat sheet, like how do I know when it makes sense to refinance. If you have a financial question, there's a really good chance that we have a deliverable on our resource page that can help you navigate that decision. If you've not checked out FYI by FTE, it's a brand new blog that Daniel is writing right now. Amazing content going out on that. We want to keep you guys loaded up so that you can keep taking your finances to the next level.
Yeah, and that's why we have courses, where we're trying to load you up with the financial order of operations so you know what to do with your next dollar. In addition to that, we have the abundance cycle where once you reach a level of success from watching the Money Guy content, you can become a client. And guys, look, we're trying to fill the void even between those two. I've seen some of the comments out there where people are disappointed. They reach out, they want to work with us, but they're not quite ready. We hear you. We're going to get you something too, because no one should be left behind in this process. Just bear with us, but we are so thankful that so many of you have been part of this journey. You've actually been success stories of the abundance cycle where you are hiring us to become your financial advisors. We'll never be able to say thank you enough, and we're going to create even more content, more items that are going to help you accelerate that journey to make the abundance cycle happen that much sooner for everyone out there. Thank you so much. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.